On Mother's Day, the package arrived, a plain brown box on the porch with no return address. I carried it inside, thinking of surprises. I set the box on the coffee table. Mark stood behind me and said, "Don't open it." His voice cut through the room. "Why? It's from Ellie." I laughed until I saw his face. He wasn't joking. He pointed at tiny pinpricks across the lid, breathing holes. Deliberate and neat. My smile vanished. Our argument from a week ago returned, repeated requests for money, emergencies that never ended. Ellie used to call Sunday afternoons to chat. Lately, she called with bills, rent, repairs, debts. I'd been generous for years. Mark had urged limits. I had not set them. "Those are breathing holes," Mark said. He turned the box so the light showed the tiny marks. Someone had planned airflow. The idea that something alive might be inside as a joke, a message, or revenge chilled me. We scanned recent messages, cheerful photos and casual captions. Had they masked something darker? Generosity had blinded us to patterns. We patched her life until we stopped asking why. The box shifted. A soft rustle came through the cardboard, and Mark flinched. Even he stepped back. "Call someone," he said. "Now." My fingers trembled, dialing 911. The dispatcher asked questions in a voice trained to calm. I described the package and the noises. "Hissing?" she asked. The word tightened my throat. I confirmed. "Keep your distance," she instructed. "Officers are on their way." The house felt fragile. Sunlight through curtains turned dust into slow planets. Mark led me across the room and kept his eyes on the box. We watched the cardboard as if it could answer us. A police cruiser arrived. 2 officers moved with practiced purpose. Through the door came, "We received your call. Describe the package." Mark spoke clearly. Relief and dread flipped in my stomach. The officers were here, but the real question hovered. Who would send such a thing? And why, on Mother's Day? We remembered the text that had cut deepest a message implying grandchildren would be withheld unless we complied. Choosing Mother's Day felt personal, deliberate. It wasn't just a prank. It was a strike. An officer examined the box without touching, noting the small punches. "We'll call animal control," he said. "Do not open it." His radio crackled. Procedure eased the edge, but the knowledge that someone had crossed from selfishness into cruelty tightened in my chest. The day meant to honor mothers had been weaponized. While the officers worked outside, Mark and I sat quietly in the kitchen. The box was between us like an accusation. We had raised a daughter and tried to teach decency. Somewhere along the way, our goodwill had become an expectation. "Do you think she did this?" I asked. The question was a small, sharp thing. Mark looked at me, eyes unreadable. "I don't know yet," he said. But someone who knows our schedule, our habits, and how we'd react did. We both understood the implication. The quiet was broken by a faint sound from the box. A rustle, a hiss, and a firm knock on the front door. The officer's voice called from outside. "We're going to need you to step back." "We'll handle this." I took Mark's hand, and the world narrowed to the moment before the lid might be lifted and everything change. We held our breath together. They worked quickly. The animal control technician lifted the lid with gloved fingers and flashed his light inside. A corn snake lay coiled on a paper towel, its scales flashing brown and orange. It hissed once, then slid into the carrier without drama. The hiss had been real. Relief arrived, but felt thin. The technician, Mike, frowned. "Someone bought this," he said. "Not a cheap prank." He disinfected the coffee table, bagged the box, and drove away with the carrier. The house felt different, colder, smaller. Officers photographed the tiny punctures across the lid and asked the same question, "Why Mother's Day?" They noted the shipping label and the neat breathing holes. Their process reassured us, but offered no explanation for motive. After they left, Mark and I sat with cold coffee and too many quiet thoughts. I opened my laptop to distract myself and froze at a bank line. Reptile Palace, 3 weeks ago. I'd added Ellie as an authorized user years ago for emergencies. That small entry connected the noise in the box to a person with access, motive, and means, clicked into place. I called her. "Hi, Mom," she said, bright. A low chuckle echoed in the background, familiar, smug. "Probably a shipping error," she said when I asked. Her voice was too quick. The laugh threaded through again, louder. It was a small reveal. A private joke. A choice, masked as accident. I did something I had delayed for years. I logged into the bank and began to dismantle the financial safety net that had enabled this pattern. Remove authorized user, cancel recurring transfers, change PINs. Each click felt necessary, like closing a door I should have shut years ago. Confirmation notices popped across the screen. Access revoked, payment canceled. I saved screenshots of the Reptile Palace charge quiet evidence. Ellie called in a panic, then screamed in fury. She accused me of ruining her life. I kept my voice steady. "This isn't about money now," I said. "It's about safety." She threatened to keep our grandchildren away. The threat landed, then echoed into irrelevance because the reality had shifted. If she would weaponize a living creature to frighten us, she had made the decision for estrangement herself. That evening, we made a plan. We printed bank statements, documented messages, and called our attorney. We listed steps: revoke access, file documentation, prepare for a restraining order if needed, and consider protections for the children's future funds. The snake had been a message cruel, deliberate, and unforgivable. It also made clear something necessary. Boundaries had to be enforced, legally, if required. As dusk settled, I looked out at the quiet street and felt a strange lightness. The decision to stop being the family ATM was heavy and right. Years of appeasing had taught my daughter how to extract. The box taught me how to stop. We rehearsed scenarios at the kitchen table, what to say if they showed up, what evidence we'd hand to police, who to call first if threats turned into harassment. I saved messages and bank records into a folder. Courts respect documentation more than memory. Mark sat opposite me, jaw tight, hands folded, as if bracing for a long winter. We agreed anger would not be our strategy, protection would. Still, a small feral part of me pictured the moment the cards declined and the transfers stopped, when their assumed entitlement dissolved. That private image felt almost sweet, but reality required paperwork, legal counsel, and the willingness to live in a quieter, lonelier house. They would not know what hit them. They came back faster than I expected. A beeping car pulled up the drive, tires crunching on the gravel with too much heat in them. Mark and I were finishing dinner. The house smelled of garlic and lemon, ordinary things that suddenly felt precious. The doorbell exploded through the quiet. My stomach dropped the way it does when a memory hits too hard. I wiped my hands on a towel, told Mark to breathe, and went to the door. Ellie stood on the porch with Peter behind her, hair pulled into a frantic knot, eyes rimmed in red from whatever storm she'd been riding. She looked smaller in the doorway than in photos less posed, more raw. Peter's jaw was a set line. They both carried that strange mix of entitlement and hurt I had seen in texts, but never in person like this. "Mom," Ellie said, voice a blend of accusation and pleading. "You can't do this. You can't just cut me off. We need help." I looked past her to Peter and saw the way he checked my stoop light fixture like a man making an inventory. He'd always been good at that, measuring other people's edges for leverage. For an instant, the old reflex to soften, to fix, surged in me. Then I remembered the hiss, the holes, the snake curled in a cardboard grave. "I did what I had to," I said calmly. "You sent a live animal in a package. That isn't a joke. It's intimidation." Ellie's face shifted. Denial flickered, then anger. "You're twisting this." She took a step forward. The porch felt suddenly too narrow. "Dad would never." "Dad isn't here now," Mark interrupted, and his voice held a hardness I had not heard before. He folded his arms the way he did when he meant the conversation was over. "We called the police. We called animal control." The words landed like nails. Peter tried to smile. to charm, a practiced move. Look, we're under pressure. Rent's due. Work's been awful. This could have been a prank gone wrong. His eyes darted to my face, searching for pity. A pity that had cost us almost everything. I didn't have it to give. Not this time. You can't expect us to continue to bankroll a life that weaponizes us, I said. You threaten our safety. You take our peace. That ends now. Ellie's lip trembled in a way that almost convinced me. Then she raised that old familiar threat. Grandchildren withheld. Public drama. Emotional blackmail. If you do this, you'll never see them again, she spat. Those words used to break me. They had pulled me to my knees more than once, but today something inside had been rearranged. The snake had been the warning bell. The late-night charges, the frantic texts, the quiet manipulations, all had added up. If threatening our grandchildren is your last card, then perhaps keeping them away is what they should not learn, I answered, steadier than I felt. The porch felt impossibly wide. Peter's face tightened. He stepped forward, anger heating into menace. Don't make this about martyrdom, he growled. You can't cut us out and expect to be safe. I'm not asking for safe, I said. I'm demanding boundaries. That word did something. It was small and legal and final. Boundaries. They had been absent in this family for years. They changed the conversation from emotion to structure, from begging to rules. Ellie lunged, a last attempt to claw at the old arrangements. She shoved past me, trying to grab the edge of my sleeve, breath hot with accusations. Peter followed, and for a terrifying moment, I feared the confrontation would turn ugly. Mark appeared behind me like a steadying force and, without yelling, pronounced a single line that sounded like a judge's gavel. Leave. Now. Off they went, wheels squealing, taillights flaring. But the aftermath was not relief. It was a new silence. The kind that sits heavy, because it knows something irrevocable has happened. We called Margaret, our lawyer, the next morning. Her office smelled of leather-bound files and a certainty I craved. She listened without surprise. You did the right thing by documenting everything, she said. Now we move to protection. A restraining order, revised estate planning, and an educational trust for the grandchildren. Signing papers felt like exhaling for the first time in years. I asked for the trust to be managed by an independent trustee, someone neutral, someone who would only release funds for verified school expenses. Margaret nodded. We built walls where manipulation had once crept in. There were other steps too. Change the cards, secure passwords, block accounts, keep a log of contacts. Small, tedious acts of legal housekeeping that in practice functioned like armor. Each signature and form was a stitch in a garment that would hold against the next blow. That evening, after the attorney's office, I sat on the back steps and watched the sky fold from blue to ink. The house behind me felt different not because the walls had changed, but because the rules had. The phone vibrated with a short, sharp message. A screenshot of a news alert from a local feed. The headline hinted at an anonymous tip sent to the paper. Someone was already trying to control the narrative. I felt the old fear that public spectacle could undo the quiet legal work we'd done. Then I thought of the trust documents, the restraining order forms, the police report about the snake. Evidence, not accusation, would be my defense. For the first time, I believed the law could hold what love alone had failed to protect. A soft laugh escaped me, not joy exactly, but a release. Outside, someone mowed their lawn with a drone-like hum. Inside, Mark put on the kettle. The sound was ordinary, domestic, but it felt like a promise. We would keep living. The last message on my phone glowed from Ellie, a single line. You'll regret this. I set the phone face down and watched the street until dark, knowing the story was far from over, and that the next chapter would test whether boundaries could survive betrayal. They didn't go quietly. In the days after we signed the papers, Ellie turned fury into a public theater. She posted long, tear-streaked rants across platforms, half accusation, half audience bait, painting us as cold-hearted, money-obsessed parents who'd abandoned our own blood. Friends messaged, neighbors whispered, and a cousin I hadn't heard from in years sent a link to an article repeating her side. It stung in odd places, not because the accusation was new, but because it threatened to make the truth look like cruelty. I learned fast that narrative can be weaponized, just like a package, so we documented everything. Copies of the animal control report, the police notes, screenshots of the reptile palace charge. The recorded call where Peter's laughter leaked into Ellie's voice like a guilty soundtrack. Margaret told us to keep quiet publicly and to let facts do the talking. You don't argue on social media, she said. You produce evidence in court. That became the new mantra. Then Ellie violated the restraining order. It happened the way these things often do. Small, angry, and foolish. She showed up at our mailbox late one afternoon and leaned on the porch, shouting into her phone. A neighbor called the non-emergency line. By the time Mark stepped outside to ask what she wanted, she was already recording him with a shaky hand, looking for outrage that might bring people to her side. The officer who had delivered the papers arrived within minutes. He warned her. She refused to leave. He warned again. When she pushed the boundary, he arrested her for violation. It was humiliating to watch, and somehow necessary. The law snapped the leash that words had tried to stretch. Watching Ellie placed into the back of a cruiser felt like a terrible official punctuation mark on the life we'd let unfold. I didn't celebrate. I felt something heavier: grief for the child who had become a threat, and relief that boundaries would now be enforced by something that wasn't love or guilt. Court dates followed. Margaret guided us through the small, bureaucratic choreography: forms, affidavits, testimony. We provided the evidence, the snake report, the charges, the timeline of automatic transfers, and the screenshots proving we'd warned her. The judge granted extended protections and ordered counseling for Ellie as part of a diversion program. Something we hadn't asked for, but quietly hoped would help her see where hatred had grown. The legal victory didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a safety valve being installed, necessary plumbing to keep the house from flooding again. The educational trust took the sting out of the larger financial drama. An independent trustee, a firm with no ties to family dynamics, now controlled the funds earmarked for Emma and Jake's schooling. It paid for tuition, tutors, and educational expenses after being presented with invoices. No cards, no cash transfers, no secret access. The grandchildren were provided for without giving their parents leverage. It felt like building a fence between love and enabling. Time did the other work. Ellie's posts lost their heat. People tire of indignation when it requires constant fuel. Her friends pulled back when legal notices arrived on their doorsteps. Peter found work in another city. Pride that once supported his threats now forced a quieter life. He called less often. Sometimes he called to apologize. But apologies delivered through distance lack the force that heals. We repaired smaller things that money couldn't touch. Our sleep returned first, then our appetite. Mark and I started taking walks again, noticing the small civic rhythms, mail carriers, school buses, the cadence of a town that went on whether a family imploded or not. We took to volunteering at a community helpline, helping older folks spot scams and predatory patterns that look a lot like our past. There was purpose in that work, the knowledge that boundaries helped others stay whole as well. People always ask if I regret what happened if I miss my daughter. Of course I do. Memory is a gallery filled with childhood drawings, burnt toast breakfasts, and late-night homework sessions. But I don't miss being a bank account dressed up as a parent. I don't miss waiting for the next crisis, the next manipulative plea. Boundaries cost me a daughter's warm presence sometimes, but they returned something I'd stopped asking for: my life. The last twist came quietly. A few months after the court ruling, Ellie reached out an email, short and clumsy. She asked about Emma's ballet recital and whether photographs could be shared with her. The trustee handled the logistics. I responded with conditions: supervised visits, no financial requests, and proof of counseling progress. It was not forgiveness wrapped in a bow. It was cautious opening. a door with a chain across it. If she wanted to come through, she would have to walk through accountability. That's the real lesson I learned. Love and boundaries aren't opposites. One, without the other, becomes codependent and dangerous. Protecting the people you love sometimes means saying no until yes can be earned honestly. We had to be brave enough to stop being the solution to someone else's problem long enough for them to start solving it themselves. If you've ever felt trapped by someone else's constant emergencies, hear me. Setting a boundary isn't betrayal. It's the first step toward a healthier future for them and for you.